So we'll talk about AFSK again, which stands for audio frequency shift keying as opposed to direct frequency shift keying. The WSJTX modes again in HF. So, and then actually I have PSK in the wrong place because RTTY is FSK, and WinLink and Vera, they're all FSK. PSK is PSK 31. I forgot to go fix that chart. So a top of modulation used in HF is frequency shift keying. RTTY uses it where it shifts, I believe it's 170 hertz between a mark and a space. And I think what mark is 2125 hertz, something like that. Not that you have to know that. So which of the following types of modulation is used for data emissions below 30 megahertz? Like I mentioned, there's direct frequency shift keying and audio frequency shift keying. In the case of direct, you're actually digitally modulating the VFO. So you're shifting the VFO frequency. In the case of audio frequency shift keying, the VFO is on a fixed frequency and you transmit a varying tone on one of the sidebands. And by default, FT4, FT8 use upper sideband regardless of whether it's above or below 10 megahertz. And RTTY uses lower, I believe. One of the others is always an exception. It uses lower regard. I think it's RTTY. It may come up in later. I guess, and one of the more important things is with the audio frequency shift modes, you care about ALC. It can really mess it up. So what's the difference between direct FSK and audio FSK? So a lot of these use some specific subbands like FT8 is on the 20 meter band is B14074. On the 40 meter band, it's 7.074 plus 3 kilohertz. I don't remember what it is on the other bands. It doesn't come out a nice number, although on 10, it might be 28074. I'm not sure. Most of these things fall within this 14 on 20 meters between the 14070 and the 14112, whether it's FT8 or 65 or RTTY, any of those. PSK is down closer to the 14070 on 20 meters. And they're on the 80 meter band, they're in this 3585 to 3600 subband. In what segment of the 20 meter band are most digital mode operations commonly found? Which of the following is a common location for FT8? Let's see, all of these modes in the WJTX suite use frequency shift keying. So it's anywhere from FT4 to Whisper. They don't list them all, but I think all of them are all frequency shift keying modes.
AFK?
Huh?
AFSK?
AFSK. Well, let's say frequency shift keying. I don't know that all of those are audio frequency. They more than likely are, but I can't verify it. I do know FT8 and FT4 are. Why FT8 became the most popular, I'm not sure, because there was an awful lot of resistance by old timers who didn't want to have anything to do with these digital modes where you didn't talk to somebody and you can't even communicate on the keyboard. Although that's not entirely true. There is some space in the third sequence where you can actually inject a little string of characters. Yeah, but you can pass information. The main reason it became popular is you can decode down below the noise floor, so you can make contact with stations all around the world with a crappy antenna and not much power. Things you could never do with SSB.
If you're below the noise floor, though,
It's magic.
it is. Because in my pen adapter, the signals, well, there are some that are at the noise floor that still seem to be coded, but below it.
Oh, yeah. You can actually see them if you look at the waterfall,
Yeah.
and you'll see a little waterfall, and you can't see any blip on the spectrum.
But it's still decoded. And also it pops up the station there. Like,
And it'll have a negative number up there in the
yeah,
list too.
-25.
Now, I've never been able to get a negative 25, even though supposedly you can. I'm usually limited to -12 or 14. But then I just got a vertical antenna.
Oh.
It's magic. It uses, well, it has to be time synchronized with your computer. And for it to work, both stations have to be less than a second. And they usually recommend 1/10 of a second variation from GMT time. So if your computer is time synchronized with GMT somehow or other, and you update your radio, you're usually good, although one of the fields that gets reported, I don't remember if it's on part of FT8 or the JT alert, it will show the time difference,
FT8.
whether or not they're outside it turns red if they're
Typically within tenths of seconds, I think.
Yeah. It uses 8 tones of a continuous phase, some kind of Gaussian stuff, with a 15-second transmit cycle and a 15-second receive cycle. So it takes 30 seconds to actually do a decode. And to do the full thing, you have to do what, at least 3 steps? I think it's just 3, because you do the first one, the third one, and the 5th one when you're receiving. Because there's like 5, and you skip. It depends on whether you're transmitting or receiving, or whether you do the odd or the even stages.
Well, that's
That is, yeah, but I think they had. The program set up to send a call sign and grid square to respond to a CQ. But you can bypass that and go straight to the signal report and three cycles, you can have a confirmed
Right.
contact.
Because if you look in that little list of the sequence, you'll see it, and then you do the first one, and then it'll highlight the third one, and then it'll highlight the fifth one, and that's where you get the RR,
Yeah. They have
hopefully,
RR 73 or something.
yeah. Okay, so which of the following synchronizes WSJTX digital mode, transmit, receive, timing?
Oh,
Which of the following is required when using FT8? What's the length of an FT8 transmission cycle? And FT4 is? It has specific time slots for sending and receiving, and you can switch those. So you can, instead of transmitting on odd and receiving on even, you can transmit on even of the time slots and odd, and you can pick up stations that you couldn't see otherwise. So instead of leaving the band, I always do the switch and see if there's anybody over there. Trying to find a clear frequency to transmit on is sometimes a challenge. And I have to keep moving around because people will pop in where I am, right on top of me.
I'm assuming they do that to me, of course, too, and I'm assuming they just can't hear me. So they think
Well, it could be.
an open frequency, either that or they're being involved.
It's probably a little both. But yeah, I have to do a lot of jumping around. And I haven't figured out if it's better to be close to the transmitting station or far away. I usually just try to find a dark spot in the waterfall. So which of the following is good practice when choosing a transmitting frequency to answer a station calling CQ using FT8?
Oh, wow,
Yeah, the same time slot as you. You'd be one of those people you don't like. Bandwidth of FT8 is approximately 50 hertz. It divides that 50 hertz bandwidth up into these 8 tones. So each tone representing a symbol is 6.25 hertz. So you're sending out this sideband signal of, say 1,000 and 6.25 hertz for one symbol and 1,012.5 hertz for the next symbol. But it's going to vary in that 50 hertz range. So it is the narrowest of the MSK 16, which I don't even know what that one is, RTTY and PACTOR. I guess PACTOR 4 is the latest PACTOR, because it talks about PACTOR a lot and then they throw in a PACTOR 4 occasionally. So which of these digital modes has the narrowest bandwidth? FT4 is becoming more popular. I know Greg likes it because it's faster. But other than the fact that it's 4 tones instead of 8, and the cycle time is half, all the other stuff is basically the same. It's just not as sensitive. And I guess that's FT4 in contesting mode. Yeah, K1JT is Joe Thomas's call sign.
Taylor,
Huh?
Taylor. You said Thomas.
Oh, Taylor. Joe Taylor. I think he won a Nobel Prize. He was Bell Labs. Well, a lot of this stuff is also done by a guy named Frank. And a lot of times you'll see the two things together. Gosh, what was the other guy's name? Something Frank
Taylor.
Taylor.
Frank Taylor and Joe Taylor?
No, it was, Frank is his first guy's last name. Frank with an E on
Yeah, Frankie.
it. Yeah, Frank.
Oh,
Second person's last name is Taylor.
What does the 4 in FT4 represent? FST4 is a new one. I think I looked it up. It was like 2023 or something, so fairly new. Designed for the low frequency and medium frequency bands. And it's for a two-way QSO. It uses a 4-tone FSK modulation like FT4, but it has this weird sequence thing of these different sequence links that it can send with different spacings and different transmit receive periods. It's really complicated, but I don't know that you have to know all that in order to use it. That's what it looks like. Not that much different than FT4, FT8. Although I don't see a spectrum, I just see a waterfall. So which of the following is characteristic of the FST4 mode?
well, Alpha's right.
Alpha's right,
Yeah.
but it has all that other stuff that I don't understand.
First time.
JT65 and Q65 are similar, both designed for the VHF UHF. 65 has been around for a while. It was originally designed for moon bounce contacts. One of the differences is Q65 does an average of signals. I don't know how many, but it does some kind of averaging, so it can compensate for weaknesses in the signal, dropouts, things like that. So it's looking at an average of the signals it's receiving. So I think that's one reason it maybe do better on some of these things like tropospheric scatter, meteor scatter, and some of those, and I guess moon bounce. I know you can have what they call libration fading on moon bounce because of the irregular surface, and as the moon's moving, your reflection isn't always in the same angle. How does Q65 differ from JT65? Charlie. Whisper, weak signal propagation reporter, is one of these one-way deals. It's basically for beacons that send out signals. So, and there's beacons all over the globe. So you can look for any of these beacons and find out whether or not, if you can receive that signal, then it means propagation between you and wherever that beacon is pretty good. And they're all, as far as I know, fairly low power. Now, the Pico balloons also use Whisper at, was it 10 milliwatts, I think.
so much, just a few milliwatts.
Yeah. And I was seeing my signal picked up, gosh, as far away as Australia when it was up in the northern latitudes. Huh?
It's doing some bounces.
Although it could have been doing the alternate path over the pole. I don't know. Because I got up to within 50 miles of the North Pole at one time.
You physically?
No, my balloon.
Oh,
W3RDL/D. Before its demise in the East China Sea.
they shot us again.
Yeah, maybe. I do know when it was over the stands, there was very little communications.
And flat, the GPS just gets garbled big time over there.
Yeah, because it did some really strange jumps.
Yeah.
Which of these digital modes does not support keyboard to keyboard operation? RTTY. It uses FSK. Has 170 hertz shift. We're not sure about the mark frequency. I think it's 2125. That's what sticks in my head. Because usually they list it that way, 2125, 170. And it shifts down for a space, right? Or no? I guess that's important. Yeah. See, what is this? It's a 7300 decoding RTTY. Right on the screen. But in order to send, you still need a keyboard, right?
No, you can pre-program.
Well, okay.
But if you want to insert his call sign or something like that, I don't think there's an easy way to do it directly on the radio.
Yeah, I don't believe it has a software keyboard that you can bring up. What's the most common frequency shift for RTTY emissions in the amateur HF bands? You need an audio connection between the transceiver and a computer for most, well, essentially all of the digital modes. I guess in the case of the 73 doing the RTTY, there's kind of a computer in it doing that part of the decoding, but you still need to connect something up to transmit. So in this case, the computer is actually generating the audio frequency shift keying tones, and they're being sent to the transceiver, usually over, in most of the modern ones, USB, so they have a virtual audio in and out as well as a push to talk, as opposed to having one of these, what's the little rig something you have to buy for the older radios that don't have sound cards? Digirig or something, yeah. Signaling. Yeah, here it is. LSB is normally for RTTY. And USB is most of the digital modes, particularly FT8 and 4, regardless of frequency. So which mode is normally used when sending RTTY signals via AFSK with an SSB transmitter? What's the standard sideband for JT65, 9, 4, FT8? To tune in a RTTY signal, you normally use that, well, like on the 7300, they have the 2 bars and you try to center it, I guess.
Those are 170, they're spaced 170 hertz apart. And you try to get the 2 tone peaks to line up in those bars.
There's some where I think some of the RTTY things I've seen do the ellipse, the double ellipse, and you have to get those equal and opposites and rectangular, perpendicular. If you're not able to decode RTTY or some of the other FSK signals, in the case of RTTY, your mark and space might be reversed. Not sure how you fix that. Is that a setup on the computer? I don't think you can switch it on the radio.
That's in the program.
Okay. You could have the wrong baud rate. Or you be on the wrong sideband. That's just 3 ways to screw up. There's probably more. So the object of this is to get the one ellipse perfectly vertical and the other ellipse perfectly horizontal. Exactly what that means, I'm not sure. Is that like representing I and Q or something?
I think it was.
Was?
Well, it was one of the hours nights.
Yeah.
Well, that's everything else was some months ago.
I think that's just showing the 170 hertz offset for one frequency, 170 hertz off.
Okay, I've never seen it explained as to what it really is showing me, other than the fact that you're tuned in when they're perpendicular. What could be wrong if you cannot decode RTTY or other FSK signals, even though it's apparently tuned in properly? WinLink. Anybody use WinLink? It uses nodes or stations that are connected to the internet. Sometimes they call them gateways, similar to digital voice. It use gateways into the internet for D-Star and DMR and Fusion. I think FreeDV, although I've never played with it. In order to actually connect through one of these, you have to send a connect message, which is very similar to the digital voice. You actually have to send a connect before you can actually start to transmit. And WinLink uses the VARA, which I don't remember what VARA stands for, but it's kind of a software modem. It's a digital protocol. There's a number of things that use it. WinLink is one of the older ones. I've used VARAC, which is similar to WinLink, although a lot easier to use. It uses VARA also. It's a pretty cool program. You can do email with it and messages. And first time I tried it, I made contact with his truck driver, although he's parked. He was hauling chicken legs from North Carolina somewhere and was going to pick up some pork stuff going the other way.
Chicken legs?
Yeah, drumsticks. I don't know, something like that. Which of the following describes WinLink? Did I mention it was packet?
Oh.
What?
Yeah.
What's another name for WinLink remote message server?
Probably.
Yeah, that's it.
Which of the following is a way to establish contact with the digital messaging system gateway station? What is VARA? Yeah. Pactor is another one. That's, as I recall, that's the one that required a proprietary modem device, TNC or whatever they called it. So I don't know that it got used that much in amateur radio. But it's still around it in the question pool. What'd you do?
I just. It did that. No, it didn't do it. It just slapped, sorry.
An airburst.
Yes, sorry.
One of the things that, well, a couple of things, Pactor uses the ARQ protocol, which is automatic receive or repeat request, I think it stands for, where if it detects an error, it sends back an ARQ asking the transmitting station to retransmit the packet. It also supports transfer of binary files, so you could send pictures, not just text. You can't use it for keyboard communications like RTTY or PSK31. It's kind of store and forward sort of thing. It has a very high data rate, at least Pactor 4, which I'm assuming is the latest version of it. So it's a higher data rate than the ones listed. The 170 45 baud is another way to say RTTY. And I still don't know what MSK16 is. But it's a multi-frequency shift keying, probably 16 tones, I would guess, but I'm not sure what it's used for. You might get interference in trying to do a Pactor communications. It can cause many retries where it has to send an ARQ and retransmit. Usually there's a limit set up to only do it like 3 or 5 times, and then you just close the connection. It could also cause long pauses because of retransmission. And if it gives up, then you can't establish a connection, or it drops you out. I'm not sure how you do this, but you can set it up to monitor connections to see if the channel is busy. I've never used it, so I have to go with what the text says. And you cannot join in or break in on a Pactor communications. It's a two-party only. So what symptoms may result from other signals interfering with a Pactor or Winmore transmission? How do you join a contact between two stations using the Pactor protocol? Which of the following HF digital modes can be used to transfer binary files?
It's,
Which of these digital modes has the fastest data throughput under clear communication conditions? ALE is the automatic link enable protocol. And stations have a list of frequencies to check, to scan through. And if they find somebody on one of those frequencies, then they can set up a communication link with it. If you have trouble, it's kind of like the Pactor thing. You could be on the wrong transmit frequency. You're not using the right protocol, or the other station just can't hear you, even though it's on the list. So to set up an ALE station, you need a single sideband radio with an internal microprocessor in order to handle it. I'm not sure what kind of radio that is. And an FSK modem. Anybody done ALE? I assume that it's a special single sideband in order to be able to scan through that list. I'm pretty sure it's not a 7300. And it does use the bit error rate to keep a score for that particular frequency and station. Exactly what it does with that, I'm not sure, but I guess it prioritizes people with better scores. Digital voice does a little bit of that. It keeps track of the bit error rate. How do ALE stations establish contact? PSK 31, which is now phase shift keying as opposed to frequency shift keying. PSK 31 has a 31 hertz bandwidth, and that's where the 31 comes from. But I think it's also 31 baud. And one of the reasons for the narrow bandwidth, it uses Veracode, which is a variable length coding we've talked about before, instead of ASCII, where every character is the same length. This uses variable length, so your vowels are all short, 2 or 3 bits, and the least used ones are up 6, 7, 8 bits. So it's minimizing the amount of bit toggling that goes on. There's a picture part of the Veracode list, and you can see here E is a 1-1. And where's A? Yeah. E is more popular than A, so A is a 1-0-1-1. And O is a 1-1-1. So they're all the vowels. Which of the following HF digital modes uses a variable length coding for bandwidth efficiency? Okay, so we talked about the difference between direct FSK and audio FSK. What subbands on the 20 meter in particular? What subband FT8 uses? How to do synchronization in the WSJTX modes. FT8's an 8-tone continuous phase FSK, excuse me, where you have to have your clocks within 1 second or better. It has a 15-second transmit cycle or a 30-second transmit receive cycle. Oh, another typo. I don't have error correction. And it's good practice to find a clear frequency during an alternate time slot for the calling station. And the FT8 bandwidth is 50 hertz. FT4 is similar, but it's a 4-tone instead of an 8-tone. FST4 is similar to FT4, except it uses all these different periods and tone spacings and really complicated stuff.
Just Gaussian frequency.
I don't know.
Well, that's.
It brings all of these with the technical definition is Gaussian, but exactly how it's being used. I do remember back 60 years ago, something about Gaussians in college.
Gaussian distribution.
Yes.
But I don't know. And I don't want to go back and remember.
That's the big difference between ST4 and FT4.
No. FT4 is also Gaussian. I just didn't put it in there because in the question pool answer, it doesn't have it. But it is a Gaussian, and FT8 is too. So it's common to all of them. But exactly what it means, I don't know. I always ignore it because.
So the last two, variable transmit receive periods and 7 different tone spacings are different on the FST.
The receive periods and the tone spacings are different.
Yeah.
Right. There's 7. Yes. Well, it's still 4 tones, but they do the spacing different.
Oh, okay.
So you're on FT4. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it's still 50 hertz, but you're dividing whatever that bandwidth up is up by 4. Whereas on FT8, you're dividing the 50 hertz by 8, and that's where you get the 6.25 hertz. So you got a similar thing for FT4, and then a different one for FST4. And somehow they have this 7, there's 7 periods and 7 tones, spacings, not tones, but spacings. So there's apparently space between the tones. It's very complicated, but you just have to remember it's complicated. That's the answer. JT65 was originally designed for EME. Q65 is a newer variation where they're averaging receive cycles. It's the biggest difference in it. Plus it operates, or they advertise it at 6 meters. And WSPR is weak signal propagation reporter, mostly beacons around the world, but Pico balloons also use it. And it's a one-way communications. And we talked about direct and audio FSK. Is this the same chart? No, maybe not. Time accuracy, better than a second. I think I duplicated that one and forgot to erase it. RTTY is also frequency shift keying at 170 hertz shift. It uses lower sideband as opposed to the rule, whereas FT8 and others use upper sideband, regardless of frequency. If you're having decode issues, you could have your mark space reversed, wrong baud rate, wrong sideband. Kind of like single sideband when you're on the wrong sideband. It's kind of hard to decode.
Hey, excuse me a second. I think there's a model of a WSPR radio that is a transceiver. I just bought one.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
So no, the WSPR is not exclusively one way. That's my point.
Yeah, because you
Kind of has to be.
have a duty cycle, you want to be transmitting 20%, receiving 80%. So
Well, okay. Yeah, I do remember on the Pico balloon in the setup, there was two time slots. But we only used one.
Well, I bought that 80 through 10 meter WSPR thing that supposedly pings the world and checks your antenna's radiation pattern.
Oh, yeah. Really?
I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure it's a transceiver.
Okay, well, that'd be interesting to know. I'm just thinking about how it does your radiation pattern.
that's.
It transmits and looks for an echo back from the beacons.
Okay.
It gets
Well-
a coded report, and you end up with a map of where in the world you're reaching.
Oh, well, that's kind of standard PSK report or what is it? Not PSK reporter. Forgot the name. Something like,
My only point is it's not one way.
all right.
I'll send you the data later.
Okay. We talked Pactor and the problems you can have from interference, that you can't join a Pactor conversation. It's, I guess, the only one we've talked about that can send binary files. The automatic link enable protocol, where you can have the radio scan this list of frequencies and activate when it gets a call sign received. It sounds a lot like scanning, but they make it sound like it's different. Because if I scan, it'll stop when it gets I can give it a list or say band or whatever, and it'll stop at a station that it's hearing anything from.
Is that for digital data transfer?
I guess, I don't know. Until it showed up in the question pool, I had no idea what it was. And I still don't. And PSK 31 is phase shift. The only phase shift keying we've talked about that uses Veracode, and it has a 31 hertz bandwidth. All right.